So we'll see the screen, okay?
Okay, sure.
So good morning, all. So today we are here to discuss startups and funding, basically. So that's our whole idea, and we are trying to find all the myths behind funding specifically, and also on some. Also, we'll be touching on student entrepreneurship. So that's the whole agenda for today's live interaction session. So audience around, please feel free to ask us any questions that you may have, and we'll try to take it up as and when we get a couple of them. Right. So just to give you an background of who we are and our credentials, why we are talking about this. So Derbi Foundation is our guest here. So Derbi Foundation has been around for about 5 to 6 years now, and supporting the startup ecosystem through the means of incubation. And in this incubation, they handhold the startups, be it students or be it professionals who are just starting up, and try to groom them so that they are ready for the next round of funding and next level of going on. We listen more about Derbi Foundation with Dr. Lakshmi Jagannathan, who is the CEO of Derbi Foundation. She started her career as an academician, and still she is in academics. However, her interest on entrepreneurship has allowed her to take up this additional role, and she's been doing it for last 5 years as chief operating officer till now, and now she has become the CEO of the foundation itself. And secondly, we at Squids. Squids is a design and innovation studio where our aim is to decode startups, design, and innovation. So that's the whole idea that we would like to go about it. So let's deep dive into our today's session, and let's see how the interaction goes on. Good morning, ma'am. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Ma'am, before we start, for the audience, I would like you to introduce yourself so that they know you better, and then we can take up our questions and keep going on from there.
Sure. Hi, good morning, everybody. As Siddharth introduced, I've been with the Dayanand Sagar group. I've been here last close to 15 years now with the institution, entering the 16th year rather now. I used to head the MBA program at Dayanand Sagar till about 10 years back. So I would rather say that is where when the entrepreneur bug rather bit me. Because running an incubation center, I also feel is also probably an entrepreneurship initiative. So about 10 years back, we initiated what is called an entrepreneurship cell on the campus. So basically to promote student ideas, help them become entrepreneurs. And upfront, I think in 2010, 11, where we started the cell, and we realized that we have to be self-sufficient even as an entrepreneurship cell. So, and the best way forward was writing to government, getting government grants. So, our first approach was towards the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India. They had a program, what is called IEDC, where they used to support institutions to in turn support 5 student innovators, help them build a prototype, validate it, and take it to market, become entrepreneurs. So we probably started in a small way because the funding also was very, very limited there. It was about 1 lakh per student team to build a prototype. But the ecosystem they built around it was very impressive. We were able to get industry mentors even back then to support student ideas, help them validate it. So students were really thrilled. So that time we got a very good traction with that. And 2015 is when I think we applied to become an incubator. In fact, I think even for me personally, it's been a very, very steep learning, and we always believe in constant learning. So I think we were the only incubator in the country which pre-closed our IDC and went to TPI directly in the 4th year, though it was a 5-year program. So I think 2015, where we formally launched a Section 8 company, and from then I think it's been good. It's been good going forward.
Thank you, ma'am, for such a brief introduction, and it's a really wonderful journey. So, ma'am, for today, it's a very casual and a fireside chat where you can be very, you can tell us casually your thought, nothing formal here.
Sure.
And like in today's session, we'll be like dividing the session into one, understanding the startup ecosystem, so that the new innovators who want to get into the startup field understand how it was 5 years back and how it is today. And then we would go a little more onto student entrepreneurship. Then we could look at fundings a bit more deeper, like what are the ways a student who has an idea or a startup who has an idea can go about the funding. And then we get into a little bit of healthcare, and there's a new program that you have started for the students, and we would love to know more about that as well. So that's how
Yeah.
we'll structure the talk today. Right?
That's
So, ma'am, you have any questions, or like should we start with the?
I'm ready to go.
Perfect, ma'am.
Yeah.
So, ma'am, the startup ecosystem in India has had a great boost after the Startup India, Stand Up India initiative. So, would you like to give us some idea on how was the ecosystem 5 years back and how is it today? And do you see anything growing, anything that would be growing in next couple of years, or how do you see the whole ecosystem evolving around it?
Sure. No, I think even last 5 years back to now, I think there's phenomenal change in terms of number of incubators who've added into the ecosystem, number of startups who are there, both on campus, off campus, startups from the ecosystem. I would probably say this is the beginning of the explosion of the startup ecosystem in the country. Because and what is also happening is there are not only see earlier I think about the whole incubation initiative in the country started somewhere in 1980s 85 where DST started something called STEP, I mean the Software Technology Entrepreneurship Park, and most of the TEPs have transitioned into incubators today, no doubt on that. I would say probably what happened from 1980s to 2000s, from 2000s to now, 2010 to now, probably last 10 years, I think it has been multi-fold expansion in terms of the ecosystem itself. Initially, though it started as a government intervention, and most of the incubators are located in academic campuses, primarily because, especially government-funded incubators are in academic campuses, primarily because innovation actually comes from very, very young minds which are there on the campuses, which needs to be nurtured. That's point one. Having said that, last 10 years, we've also seen a lot of corporate houses who've jumped into innovation, jumped into startup, into some form or the other, because they have also probably understood that the startups are very nimble, very agile. Innovations are much faster in a startup ecosystem. So corporates now, some of the corporates have their own accelerator programs. Some of them have partnered with the incubators which are already there. There are a lot of private incubation programs which are there. And the awareness about entrepreneurship, awareness about startups is also growing multifold now. Apart from the government intervention, support, ranking, and all that. For example, today's paper, if you see, Karnataka is ranked as number one in terms of innovation index all over the country. So I would say any initiative about on recognition, be it at a central level or a state level, everybody sees what is happening. And one of the primary reasons why they are saying, that we are so active in terms of innovation, all that is the ecosystem. So ecosystem is all of us coming together and doing it. I would say last 10 years, I think it's an exponential growth in terms of the startup culture.
Sure. So, ma'am, before we go for the next question,
Yeah.
there's a question in the live chat
Yeah.
by Srinivas Nayak asking, are incubators non-profit organizations? And ma'am, it would be also good for us to tell like even if the incubators take stake in the company,
Sure.
how does that stake get utilized, and what do you think that happens with that money, so that it's very clear that it's not a place where we make money, but it actually enables and
Yeah.
supports the ecosystem.
Sure,
If
sure.
you can just give a couple of words around that.
Sure. No, see, most of the incubators, if you see broadly, any not-for-profit organization falls into three buckets. One is trust, one is society, one is Section 8. Right? Initial days, earlier incubators, there are some incubators which are also societies. But of late, most of the incubators which have been formed in the last 5 years plus are all Section 8 companies. So Section 8 essentially means it's a private limited, but it's a not-for-profit. That is, any profit that comes into the Section 8 company has to be plowed back into the incubation itself so that it benefits the startups at large. Right? Now, there are multiple ways in which each of the Section 8 companies operate. And to be very frank, see, I think even as I said early on, when we started, even before we started incubation, our focus was primarily on how do we become self-sustainable. So it is not that we start an incubator today and tomorrow we shut shop. No, right? And most of the incubation funding by government, whether it is DST, DBT, Government of Karnataka, any of them, it is a specific window. For example, I think DBT earlier used to do 3 years, now they're looking at 5 years. DST supports incubators for 5 years. Mostly it is 5 years, right? Now, having said that, so within 5 years, the incubators have to understand the game of incubation, understand the business model. Again, I'll shortly come back to the business model of an incubator. and how do they sustain post the government funding. So one of the sustainable, I would say, revenues for the incubator would be in terms of course, no, in terms of rental and small fees, incubation fees, what they collect and all that. Predominantly, the incubation game is into equity, where some incubators take also mentoring equity. In case we give a lot of mentorship and support to the startups, be it giving dedicated mentors or giving them market access, giving them pilot trials, help them through this whole journey of transition from an ideation to the market and commercialization, right? So some of the incubators take a small mentoring fee. It usually ranges from 1 to 2%, sometimes even 3-4%, depending on the incubator. That is one. Some of the incubators, like for us, usually we don't take mentor equity, or very early stage we may consider mentor equity. Usually we take equity in startup when we give them funding, probably a small seed fund. And again, no, again this depends on to what extent you take equity for the seed fund. This varies from incubator to incubator. Some incubators, for example, we hold a thing that if the startup has not raised any other money, we are the first people to invest in the startup. We take at a flat valuation of 5 CR. And we are doing this primarily because we want to be startup friendly. Because, to be very frank, I think startups are the customers of incubators. Let us get very straight. If the startups do well, incubators by default will do well, right? So we are here for the startups. So this is how, and how does the incubator benefit from the equity? That's the next question. Now, what happens when they say, for example, incubator gets 2% equity in a startup? When the startup raises a subsequent round of funding, assuming they do well, they are able to raise the next round of funding, incubator may get an opportunity to exit. Now, incubator, for example, say we have put about, assuming we have put about 10 lakh of rupee in a startup, we get 2% equity. Now, when at say 5 CR valuation, now when the startup raises the next round of funding at a higher valuation, they say 10 CR. So that means our 10 lakhs of money would have become 20 lakhs, so we exit. Provided things are conducible and the startup agrees and we also agree. Or if it's a high growth startup, we feel we should not exit now, we should exit at the next stage, after that we can still continue. So that is how it works.
That's great, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, just because you took the point of equity over here.
Yeah.
So, ma'am, like for example, let's say Derbi Foundation incubates 10 startups.
Yeah.
And all of them are under equity. How many of them will have a successful, for you, how many successful exits can happen in those 10 companies?
Okay. Answering to your question, Siddharth, I think, see, in India, I think roughly there must be close to about 100 plus government supported incubators, DST alone, more than that, probably.
Right.
In that, if you see all the, I would say, the veteran incubators, be it incubators, like for example, could be CII or Sign, they are all veterans in the incubation ecosystem itself, where they have invested long back in these startups and all that. So most of the so-called successful startup stories, come, I think it roughly translates to about 2 to 3% of the investment what they've made. So even if we invest in about 10 startups, probably 1 or 2 successful exits may happen. That itself, we are keeping our fingers crossed.
So that means even if you say take equity from 10 startups,
Yeah.
And you put in your efforts, probably you may get some profits from 1 or 2 startups, and that gets that actually negates all other negative costs.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So friends, please understand that if you're giving an equity for an incubator, it doesn't mean that it's for incubator to make money, but it's like out of 10 of you, if 2 of you succeeds, the incubator can manage itself for next couple of years and support many more startups. So there is always a myth that the incubators start for earning money and it goes to further things.
No, another thing I would like to add here to that. See, there's also another option called future convertible. Now, what happens, see, some of the startups have also come back to us and said, we don't want to take any incubator or somebody with a lower equity dilution now on a cap table. So most of these, see, when they go to a VC or somebody is going to put a lot of money, they don't want to see the startups having diluted small equity to incubator because somebody were mentoring. So what they do is there's something called a future convertible, where we do not take equity, we take it as a later point of time. This again is to help startups so that they don't put us reflect our names in the cap table, so that they can always tell the investors that we have not diluted our equity to anybody now. So chances of getting funding is better.
Okay.
Yeah.
So guys, so you have an option as well.
As well.
Of future convertibles. So they are called as convertible notes. Please do
Correct.
Google on it. We can have a session on convertible notes later. But it's good to understand these things. Given that we are technical founders, it's always good to understand all these specific terms that we are using. That's great. Now just because you spoke a bit about step, and I know there are two types of. We all know there are two types of startup. One is a hardware startup. One is a software startup.
Correct.
Now, what happens in many of these incubators, and due to government funding in that aspect, they always insist on having a hardware or a physical, tangible component into it. So thereby, though hardware startups failure rates will be higher, their chances of getting grants are better. So now for software startups, if we look at it, does STEP still help them? Do we still have grants for software startups? And can our will our incubator ecosystem also help software startups?
Yeah, absolutely. No, see, today I think the differentiation between hardware and software is almost blurring. For example, if you take AI startups, right? AI startups, you cannot say they're pure software startups because there has to be IoT element, things like that. Having said that, no, I think the sectoral focus is now coming into picture than the technical focus. For example, now there are incubators. For example, if you take Derbi Foundation, we say we started off our journey, as I said, we probably would look at supporting IoT and AI startups. But today, if you say, we will say we are looking at supporting health tech startups, edu tech startups, probably one or two more domains. So incubators are now moving away from the concept of hardware and software into really more of a vertical focus. The reason being, you are talking about a solution, right? But there also has to be other essential elements around building, helping you building a solution and also commercializing it. Be it mentorship, be it access to pilot a solution, be it investors, are also now becoming more sectoral focused. So that is the thing. So and if most of the incubators also look at supporting hardware, supporting software also.
Right.
Yeah, primarily if you see the e-commerce boom, e-commerce or SaaS, for example, it's all software, right? But again, there are more sector focused than solution focused.
So that means, let's say some startup has an idea around, let's say, manufacturing,
Yeah.
and it's a software startup. They can approach Derby for that, or do you have any specific sectors that you support at Derby?
No, see, as of now, we are looking at healthcare and education. Going forward, probably we'll be looking at one or two more where there's a social impact focused. Yeah.
Perfect. Great. So we have basically, before we go ahead, there are a couple of questions.
Yeah.
And both of the questions are in the same line. That is, how much can an incubator fund a startup?
Depends on how much money the incubator has, right? Okay.
So probably, ma'am, let's break this question.
Yeah.
Let's break this question.
Sure.
So let's say, at least from my understanding, an incubator can fund you as a grant and as a seed fund.
Correct.
So if we start breaking up and then bringing it together,
Sure.
how much grants can they receive from an incubator, and how much seed funds, up to how much seed funds can a startup receive from an incubator?
Sure. No, this again, let me take it as two separate questions itself. For example, grants. Moment you say incubator has to give grants to startup, that is dependent on from where the incubator has got the grant. Right? Now, for example, if you take DST, again coming back to DST has about a couple of programs. There is called Nidhi Prayas. Nidhi Prayas, where every innovator gets about 10 lakhs to build a prototype as a grant. And there's a Nidhi EIR, which is a fellowship for a potential entrepreneur. Somebody who wants to be an entrepreneur, his sustenance for the next 12 months would be taken care by 30,000 rupees a month so that you can sustain, build your idea and become an entrepreneur. Again, that's a grant. And I think grants are predominantly these two, right?
How about Type 2.0?
Yeah, that's DST. These are the two. For example, if you take DBT, now DBT is Department of Biotechnology. DBT also has multiple grants again for prototyping and things like that. Well-known grant of DBT is BIG, big grant. Big grant is up to 50 lakhs. But the mandate that you should be an innovator, you should have a company when you're building this. More focus on bio. Could be biotech, could be agri-tech, could be health tech, aligned to bio. That's one. Then again, you have another scheme from MeitY, Ministry of Electronics. Ministry of Electronics also has a program called TIDE, TIDE, where again money is given to incubators to identify potential entrepreneurs, potential innovators. Up to I think 4 lakhs we could support with the TIDE program as a grant, right? So grant depends on who's the funding body who's giving to the incubator in order to support the startups, number one. And every grant has a mandate. For example, if we are supporting Nidhi Prayas for a prototyping, we cannot give it to somebody for a fellowship. So if the startup is looking for a prototyping grant, you should know what is the objective of where you're seeking money and how much are you seeking. Then accordingly you can target.
Right.
Yeah, I hope I've answered your question on the first part. Now second part with respect
Just before
to
we go to second part, ma'am.
Yeah.
So now there are also a couple of grants around MSME, PRISM, and things like that. So can
Yeah,
you
yeah.
put some highlights on that also, so that
Sure,
students know
sure.
about it?
Now again, MSME is again another grant. Again, the multiple interventions given by MSME, Ministry of Small and Micro Enterprises. They also have a program, again recognized MSME incubators, up to I think 30 lakhs. Now I think it's extended beyond. Initially it was 12 lakhs. Now they made about 20 to 30 lakhs given to MSME entrepreneurs who want to bring about some innovation in their existing setup. In fact, Dayanand Sagar also we also have an MSME incubator way back. I started about 10 years back. But essentially here, see the categories, we are looking at MSME entrepreneurs who want to innovate something in their existing setup. We had somebody who was building a smart lathe. We had another MSME entrepreneur who was building a smart ERP for procuring and management within his company. So that's the thing. Similarly, Prism has its own guidelines of what you want to do, how you want to attract money and things like that. There's also an Atal Incubation Center. Now, Atal, I don't think Atal has a grant. Atal, what they do is they identify incubators which give seed fund. Yeah.
So probably here you can come to the second
Seed
part of the
fund,
question,
exactly.
seed fund. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, seed fund, no, see, when we get a mandate from the seed fund, again, primarily based on the government department which is supporting you, there is a mandate. So, minimum could be, there's no minimum wage, but most of the incubators keep around 10 to 20 lakhs. Anything lesser than that will have no use to the entrepreneur, right? So, up to a crore, you could probably give a seed fund. But not many incubators would give really up to a crore because, to be very frank, seed funding is also like spraying and praying, right? So we don't want to put all eggs in one basket. Probably we'll support at least some minimum number of entrepreneurs, and at least hopefully one or two of them could be successful. So seed fund is essentially, I think, yeah, up to a crore could be given, but most of the incubators give in the range of maximum about 40 lakhs, 40 to 50 lakhs. And in subsequent rounds of funding, for example, in our case itself, no, we had funded somebody about 20 lakhs. Last year, the startup did very well. So subsequently, we put in some more money into the startup because there was good traction. We also felt yes, the startup needs to be supported.
Right, right. No, before we go further on funding, like, there is one question, but we'll park it for a while
Sure.
and then we'll bring back this question.
Sure.
Because there's a whole section that we are going to talk about funding a bit more. So basically, ma'am, though we have spoken about the funding already, but apart from that, in today's kind of era, can you shed lights on the various opportunities that we have for an entrepreneur, and what is the pros and cons of being an entrepreneur itself?
Okay. See, I definitely a pro of an entrepreneur is independence, right? I always consider even myself to be an entrepreneur because having come from a family of entrepreneurs, probably this initiative of incubation and Dayanand Sagar was an opportunity for me to come out of my regular routine job and do something radically totally different from what I was doing. I think this is one big advantage of being an entrepreneur. One, you can be on your own, you can be your own boss, you can do things at your own pace, do things faster or whatever, and you end up getting the benefit of whatever efforts you are putting in, right? So that's very, very key. But having said that, that's the glamour of the entrepreneurship stops there, right? But it's a tough game. I always tell startups, the entrepreneurship or being in a startup is not an 100-meter dash. It's a marathon. So you should have number one stamina and perseverance to do. No, never give up. I think if you have that never give up attitude, things can be done. And as far as tech entrepreneurship or any entrepreneurship is considered, I think India today it's the right time. There's a lot of support ecosystem which is evolving, be it at the student level to mature entrepreneurs. We have had the people at Derbi who have left companies with 30 plus years experience who become entrepreneurs. So if there's an opportunity, if there is a customer who's ready to put in that 1 rupee on the table for your solution, I think that's a very good validation to go.
That's a great point made, ma'am. And guys, as ma'am rightly said, that it's really a right opportunity. But to identify the right opportunity, please keep your eyes and ears open. You don't know what incidents can actually click that specific idea, and you can actually have a next $1 billion startup coming up in picture. But not all startups are $1 billion, so be aware of that as well. So it's not always about the money, but also about the journey. So, ma'am, going a little bit forward, since we
Yeah.
spoke about ecosystem over here. So, what do you? So, basically, now we all know that there are many startups who want to do everything on their own in house, and we have seen that a lot of time. What happens is one, they fail faster because everything is in, they will not have all the capabilities, etc. And second, there is also a kind of a scenario where people are reluctant to talk about their idea with the fear that the idea can get stolen. So, ma'am, in this context, what do you think? Is the role of collaboration here? And do you have any pointers to startups and innovators on how can they collaborate at the same time safeguard their idea, because patenting is expensive, but they still have to talk to people to get their idea validated and collaborate, right? So
Sure.
your thoughts around that would be really
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question. Especially student startups I've seen, many of them are very, very apprehensive about sharing their ideas. Even some early stage startups, they say you sign an NDA, we then share, do this, do that. No. As I said early on, again coming back to the same point, see, startup is a long journey. And if your idea is so easily copyable by anybody, they could always replicate even after you come into the market. So if you are getting into a business which has real high barriers to entry and others are finding it difficult, then you are up for a long haul. That is one point. Having said that, no, see again, not all ideas are patentable. Again, not all patentable ideas are commercializable. I think that point should be very well taken. Now, for example, if you take some of the success stories of Indian startups, starting from Flipkart, there was no big patent in what they did, right? But a very good commercial success. So again, if there is a market, what you're planning to do, you should do that. Having said that, if you are a single person, of course, the idea originates always in some minds aware, right? But see how you could probably talk to people, either talk to like-minded people, definitely, talk to brilliant teammates who could probably complement your skills. For example, usually if you have a tech solution, probably as an engineer, see if you can get fellow engineers who could complement what you have, or get somebody from a business background to join with you. Even investors are not ready to invest in a single founder company. It's very, very difficult. Because the risk is huge, there's a one founder company. Also, please keep in mind, I would say that I think one primary reason most of the good startups fail is because of co-founder issues. So when you're onboarding somebody as a teammate, as a fellow founder, be very careful that your synergies are very well aligned so that you can work together for a long period of time. I think that's very important. So, and I don't think you should hesitate talking about your idea to any n number of people. Get in as many perspectives as possible so that you don't know. See, you start with something. In fact, I was mentoring one. I'm still mentoring the startup. He started with something. He started as a wanted to do a robo as an agri robo for fruit orchards. But finally, what he's doing something is totally different. To what he started off. The more people you talk, the more it is better for you because it probably helps you to either succeed faster or fail faster.
right. But do you have any pointers that without patents, how can they safeguard their idea? Like anything that you think how they can approach people?
See,
Any example would be really good.
there are two things. One is, if you feel that you could probably do a patent search, in doing a patent search and initial drafting is probably a couple of thousands of rupees, 5 to 6 thousand rupees. And today, if you reach out to many incubators, there are a lot of government schemes where you can get reimbursed. And for anybody today, 5 to 6 thousand rupees is just pocket money for a month. In fact, see, the other thing what I detest in some of the early startups is they feel that they have an idea, money will come flowing from somewhere, people will fund them starting from patenting. Why will somebody give you money? I've asked many of them. For example, if it is a birthday party, you spent about 8 to 10 thousand rupees for a party, right? Why can't you put that initial money and get a draft patenting done? If you feel this is a very strong tech background, you need to patent, then go ahead do a patenting. Otherwise, if patenting is not a must, I think you should right away go build a solution and then take it to market.
Okay. So guys, here I would also like to give you one small pointer
Yeah.
as an entrepreneur myself. So one of the other way to save out that 5,000 to 6,000 rupees is you write a whole thing about everything that comes in your mind about your idea. Write it completely, draw some figures, etc. Go to patent nearest patent office in your zone, and you can yourself file it for 1,000 rupees, and that's called as provisional patent. And then you have one hole here where you can actually build your solution completely, and you can use an attorney who could file your claims well and draft it perfectly, and thereby you can then get a patent. And the best part is after once your idea is firm and you are into an incubator, many incubators and many grants around it has some money for you to actually file a patent. So you can utilize that money to file a patent. So you can always do a provisional by yourself, but see to it that when you're doing provisional, write out everything that's in your mind. You don't need to claim anything, but you just write your idea, detail out like everything, basically each and every minute step, like for example, if you want to eat food, right from making rice to how are you going to eat, write everything onto it, and then go and just file that document, so that you are covered, right? And then when you write a patent around it, it's like there is something on provisional already and you have a priority date. So there are a lot of things around patents, which probably a patent attorney will tell you better. But just for a kind of one liner, like you can file your own provisional. It would just cost you about 1,500 rupees at the most. And please go ahead and safeguard if you feel that your idea is so good and someone will copy. But as ma'am rightly said, if your idea is so easy to copy, probably you need to think deeper whether that's the idea that you want to pursue, right? So that's a great insight, ma'am, on this.
Sure.
So, ma'am, next, just going a bit forward on that. Now, when it comes to in the same question that we asked, we spoke about collaboration. So, what do you think are what are the kind of collaboration a very early stage startup should go about? Because product development takes time; they don't have money, but still they have to make a perfect product so that someone buys. So, what do you think the collaborations that they should enter into?
Sure. No, I think that is where they should probably get into some incubation program or reach out to some nearest incubator or incubator wherever they are comfortable. No? Again, incubators are very sector focused and offering of each incubators varies. But wherever startups get a good fit, probably get into some incubation programs somewhere. Because through an incubator, what happens, startup could also have access to some lab facilities where you could go, probably build your solution, try it out. You could also get some good mentorship available, and if possible, probably some access to some funds, either as grants or investments. And good part is, I think, being a part of an incubator, the best part is you would also have many fellow startups like you. See, most of your problems could be same, or most of your opportunities could be same. So you could see a lot of collaboration happening also with other startups who are there or other founders who are there with you. So that is one advantage. Or if you still feel, no, I don't want to be a part of an incubation, it is too early. So there's nothing like too early or too late. In fact, we have also supported many guys who've been part of our program, who've been with us, who've not even found a company. I think this is also another myth probably I would like to add here. Many of these startups feel that, or many of the entrepreneurs feel that I should register my company. When should I register my company? That's a big question, right? I think registering a company is like giving birth to a child. Your responsibility starts because you're getting into a legal binding once you have a company incorporated. I don't think you should form a company till you have a customer who's ready to pay you money, or you may also get some initial payments in your direct name. People may pay you also as personal thing, no issues. When you are planning to really scale up, when you know yes there is traction, there are people paying me, I have to be a legal entity, I'll have to raise money, I have to do branding, marketing, blah blah, all that stuff, then form a company. People are not very clear that if there's a gray line of should I do, what should I do, when should I do. I think you can push it by few months, no issues.
That's great. So, ma'am, before we go on ahead,
Yeah.
there is a question by one of our viewers asking, will Incubate only look up into funding or will help in other aspects such as building a team for the startup you funded, like helping in building a technical team, financial team, etc. So,
Sure, definitely. See, incubators also do not want to. It should be win-win for both of us, right? Incubators also look at ROI for the money they put in, and at what stage the startup is, whether a 10 or 20,000 or whatever money for 20 lakhs, whatever the incubator is giving it to the startup, should also make useful sense for the startup to use this money and do something more meaningful, right? So incubators funding is only probably 10 to 20% of what an incubator does. Incubator, see, somebody who comes into, for example, Derbi Foundation, what we do is we do something called a milestone setting for 2 years, where we jointly work sit with the startup one to one, understand what should be the startup be doing for the next 2 years. So together we help the startup define their target for the next 2 years, and jointly help them in achieving those milestones. Milestones could be simple like getting a co-founder or deciding, building a solution or reaching out to a particular mentor or trying out your solution, testing it somewhere, validating it, coming back and or raising money could be all of these. So funding is a very small part of what an incubator does.
So guys, just to be very clear, funding is not the first thing an incubator does. It's somewhere in the between. Once you start your journey,
Sure.
probably after 3 to 6 months is when you can expect your funding. But before that, you need to prove them that you are capable, right? So it's not like don't approach incubator just for the funding, but then you will be having a longer cycle to get things in place for the incubator to understand you well. So it's like, so we always say that investments are like marriage, right? So any kind of investment, that there needs to be a trust, and for building that trust, it depends on how good you are in showcasing it well. So please do understand that incubator is not the fund only the funding part that they do. And in fact, to be frank, as ma'am rightly said earlier, that not every incubator has a mandate of funding.
Exactly.
Right? Only a couple of incubators can actually fund you. Those are supported by the government bodies, or they have created a pool for themselves to invest on you. So be very careful on choosing the right incubator as well. Right? It's not like any incubator and every incubator can be helpful for you. So be very careful on that one particular aspect. So now moving forward, though we have one more question, but let's take another question and then go for that. So as we have already mentioned that like the role of incubators in a journey of an entrepreneur, we have spoken. But now if we specifically look at Derbi and your journey with last couple of startups, could you highlight some of your successes in terms of the startups that you have supported, or what was your experience in last 5 years of being an incubator?
Sure. I would probably say that I would say that our incubator is still a startup, right? I mean, because incubation model, all that is still evolving. We are learning, constantly learning, reinventing ourselves and going forward. I think having said that, see, we started, as I said, we started in 2008, 2015, started incubating companies in 2016, right? So initially when we started, no, we took a, we had good touch wood till now. Whatever we have called for applications, there's been a very good response from the startups in the ecosystem. And as Derby Foundation, we still are supporting startups in the ecosystem predominantly. So there are not many students we would have in our programs, because Dayanand Sagar as an institution has about 4 campuses. The fourth one now coming up in Ganapura. So there are 3 campuses, fairly established, old campuses, which have an entrepreneurship cell. So there is a faculty there who takes care of student entrepreneurs, who is the first point of contact with these students. Once there is some student traction on what he is doing, then the faculty's mentors connect them to us. So they come into our incubation program, pre-incubation program rather. So we have closely, now we are touching close to about 100 startups, and I think out of 100, about 95, 96 are startups in the ecosystem, barring 1 or 2 students who have come into our program, have come into a pre-incubation program. Now, see, initially when we started the incubation program, so we started, as I said, in terms of vertical, we started as an AI and IoT program, but quickly realized that we cannot do everything in AI and IoT, because AI IoT today has applications in healthcare, applications in agriculture, industrial IoT, plethora of things. So we said, let us focus on 2 or 3 areas where we could build our strength around. So Dayanand Sagar group also has a couple of hospitals in the group and also a medical college. So we said that would be a very good differentiator for us, and also we could give very good support to startups around healthcare. So last 2 years plus now we've been supporting startups and innovators in healthcare. Having said that, then we realized startups who got into an incubation program were probably too early for incubation program. Many of them, they just registered the company, not yet registered, were very not sure of the business model. So we felt, should there be a pre-incubation program? So then we had a pre-incubation program we started. It was a 3 months program called PACE, and incubation program was called Gallop. And PACE program was a 3 months program where, again, most of the cohorts are the size of 10. And this could help people validate the business model, essentially hand-holding on the entire framework of the business model canvas. Who's my customer? What is my value prop I'm bringing in? What's the customer segmentation look like? Who are my partners? Things like that. This program is still ongoing. This we got very good feedback from the participants as well. In fact, one of the startup came to us and said, "Ma'am, good that I didn't start a company. This program was an eye opener, so I decided not to start this venture and do something else." So we've been successfully doing PACE, and startups who are successful out of PACE, some of them are very good, get into our incubation program, which is Gallop. Now, Gallop is a 2 years program, a longer duration program with investment also. So we also put our seed fund into the Gallop stage startups. When we were doing Gallop, we realized that there were some startups who are too mature for Gallop. So then we did one cohort of Emerge, which was an acceleration program. And if you notice, consciously we are also keeping the whole thing, see Derbi, Pace, Gallop, Emerge. So the whole thing has to be synchronous to what we are doing, should at least sound synchronous to what we are doing. This again, I think, goes with the philosophy of being in the startup ecosystem and startup culture. Yeah.
Right. So just like any startup, you also had a lot of pivots.
Yeah, we are still on the way. It's a never-ending process, I would say.
Right, man. Right. So, by the way, there was a question on about patent, how to take a patent. So, Sandesh, we can actually have that question sometime in a later session, because if we start getting into patent, it's a never-ending answer and it has a long process on its own. But to be very short, if you look at a patent, it's like initially the first thing that you need to do is get your provisional in place just by entering all the information. That's called as invention disclosure, and then you keep going about it and see how things happen. Again, as I told you, like, please contact someone in your incubation in your nearest, because I believe you're a college student, so your college may have an e-cell who could help them. Many colleges have their own patent centers as well, so be careful on do understand those aspects as well. But we can have a detailed session on that sometime later. And I guess many of the webinars around there is also on patents these days, so do have a look at that as well. And for the audience, if you have any other questions, please post on it for us on regarding startups or fundings or any myths that you think that we can bust for you. So please feel free to question around that, and we can take that as well. So there is one more question as soon as we spoke about this. How do you calculate exactly how many more new shares you should give to an investor? Okay, so great question, Swapna. I'll park this question for a minute because there's one more question around investment. So we'll take that section and then have a talk on that. Srinivas, again, this is an investor question. I'll bring it up in another five odd minutes, because there is an interesting announcement that is going to come now, which will also allow you to think more around that aspect. So, ma'am, like as you told, about Derbi and the various programs that Derbi has. So there was an announcement that was made recently about a new program specifically looking at student entrepreneurs. Yeah. So, ma'am, would you like to give an idea to our audience on what is that program about? How are you going to evaluate? What are the support they can expect? And whom should they connect for knowing more about this program?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Siddharth. I think it was the right time you brought in that. See, this year is the centenary year of Jagannathan, the founder of the institution. So we've always been wanting to do something as a give back to what the founders stood for. And we thought this is the right time to do something really innovative. That is number one. Number two, we've also seen, especially students on the campus, they always try to build a solution which is innovative to solve a problem which is there in the society. So somehow students have this mindset that they should build some innovation to solve a problem which is there, be it healthcare, be it agriculture or women empowerment, typical those issues which are there in the society. So now we have opened a challenge called, it is a National Innovation Challenge on social themes around healthcare, agriculture, social empowerment, education, and I think 4-5 domains. So when we thought of this about just a month old, we were thinking about doing something like this. We were talking to a couple of partners. A lot of interest also came from the ecosystem. So in fact, we've been talking to a couple of corporate. They said we would be glad to work with you, see how we could support student teams on the campuses who are coming out with some idea to solve a problem which is there in the society. So this is the challenge all about. Now we have fairly, I think, good partnership. For example, HDFC is partnered with us. They said some of the teams they could mentor. And we are also fortunate, I would say, that we have partnered with BCIC, Bangalore Chamber of Industries and Commerce. Now, BCIC essentially has hundreds of entrepreneurs who are running their businesses. So I think the top 15 teams selected for this program as a cohort would also get one-to-one mentoring with a real entrepreneur who's running this company through DCIC. Then we also have MathWorks as a partner for this program, which is into simulation software. They said we could give licenses and also support these guys of building something, simulate a solution, try it out, validate in the market. So I mean, all these partnerships. Then we have also partnered with Campus Fund, which is a wing of Wadhwani Foundation. It's a unique fund for supporting student entrepreneurs. So they are looking at identifying the next student entrepreneur on the campus and funding them. Apart from all this, what you get through our partners, Derby itself, the plan what we have is we will select about 15 teams. There's a final cohort. Now these 15 teams will go through a 1.5 months program where we would help them with at least 3 workshops, essentially building the various elements of business model canvas, in terms of customer to market and partners and all that. Number two, there'll be an in-depth patenting workshop. Many of you are talking about patenting, which a patent attorney would be doing. And we'll see if some of the good ideas also come. Probably we can also help you see how we could probably file a draft patent around that. So that would also be a part of this program. Third most important thing is around pitching. We will definitely have one workshop on how to pitch to a potential audience. Audience could be your investors or could be a jury or somebody. So that is one. Then there'll be a final pitch which we are targeting in the end of March. After the pitch, there's a couple of prize money, at least two, the winners and winning and the running team would get 1,50,000 rupees of prize money as an appreciation of what you're doing. And the teams would also, some of the selected teams would also come into the pre-incubation program of Derby, where you're planning to handhold you, support you, so that whatever idea you have conceived, you're planning to build, becomes a tangible startup at the end of the program. And also help you probably deploy some of these solutions in the field. See, some of you may be building a education solution for a rural school. See if we could connect you to some rural school, there this could be deployed. Some of you may be building a healthcare solution which needs to be deployed. Healthcare is a little more, I would say, complicated game. I'm sure Siddharth would agree, because it needs a lot of regulatory, blah blah, multiple approvals before they really try it out on the customer, that's a patient or somebody, doctor in the ecosystem. Other things are much easy, more doable, could be in agriculture. So we are here for a longer haul. It's not just a challenge like any other challenge. The real challenge starts post the challenge, where we're really going to work with you, see that your solution is deployed in the market.
Interesting, ma'am. So, what is this challenge called as, and where can people read more about this challenge?
So it is called Dayanand Sagar Social Tech Innovation Challenge. It's going to be a national challenge. The details are there in our website as well.
Perfect. So, friends, if you are a student and you are looking to get kickstarted with your idea, please do apply. And there's a good support that comes from Derby for you to take your idea forward and see if it's an alternate career path for you. So please do apply, and we can see how things goes around that. Now, since you already started speaking on challenge, and there are a couple of questions on investment, I guess this is the right time to understand. One, how do you invest, and two, in general, what do an investor see, and how do they evaluate an idea, so that people have an idea like how do they pitch and what can be done. So I'll just break down the question so that it's easier to answer. So there are a couple of questions that ask, what investors look before funding a startup.
Okay. I would probably put the team first, because ideas can pivot. Startup could start with something else, do something else, but it is a team which stays and takes forward with the idea. I think the team comes first. Team, ability of the team, the background and all that, primarily the team.
Right. So, but how do basically for creating a team, you need to pay salaries and things like that. So, do you have any suggestion for our students or innovators? How should they start finding a team and build it together, even if they don't have much money in their pocket to play around?
Sure. No, see, team also doesn't mean your employees or staff who are there. No, team could also be the founder and the co-founder, right? That is what I meant by the team. Because the staff, the employees are always on rotation. You could always hire somebody and fire somebody else could join. And campus is the best place for anybody to find a co-founder, especially if you're a student startup. Essentially because most of the campuses comes with complementary skills and departments which complement each other. For example, you may be a student in biomedical engineering. You definitely need somebody from computer science or electronics or mechanical background, You can always, you'll have your friends from other streams whom you meet in the college canteens, whom you meet in the gyms, or whom you meet in the football field, or you may be traveling in the same bus, or there are multiple reasons. Or most of the campuses also have programs like hackathons and things like that happen where you always bump into somebody who has a skill set what you've been looking for. Even if you even look at mature startups, most of the mature startups go back to their buddies whom they met in the college, onboard them, start working together. So to get a co-founder for a student startup, I would say campus is the best place.
Right, ma'am. So there was a question from Sandesh, like,
Yeah.
what if I don't have a team? So I believe the answer is you should go and talk to people and build a team for you.
No, may not be initially. See, initially, if you are alone, if you are able to do things by yourself, how much can you do yourself is a question, right? See, if you are starting with building a technology solution, if you feel you can build it, no need of a team member if you have all the skills. But somewhere, if your lack of skills or lack of time or lack of bandwidth, I would say, is stopping you from doing it faster. I think speed is the key in any startup. Then you should look for a co-founder.
Correct. And just as an entrepreneur's
Yeah.
advice for you people, like, see, entrepreneurship generally tends to become a lonely journey as we go post month two, right? Till month two, you will be like pumped with adrenaline and you'll be working like 24/7. But post that, you are gonna get tired, right? And you need someone to push you and go to the next step. So it's always better to have a team member or a friend or someone as an advisor who can actually push you forward. Even the advisors become your extended team members. So it's not like they are not called as team. They are also part of your team. Only thing is they're an external team member. So please do find like-minded people also. And
No, I would like to add to what Siddharth said. I think you need somebody who brings in that positivity in you always. Because there are n number of reasons, to puncture you down in the ecosystem. But you stay afloat, you need somebody who can constantly keep you motivated and bring in that positivity. Having said that, you also need somebody who could also probably make you see sense. Because startup, I think one big problem with the startup is you're always so much in love with your idea. I would say pink-eyed startup, you don't see anything beyond your idea. That should not happen.
perfect.
Yeah.
Ma'am, and so apart from team, how is an idea evaluated for investment? So,
So definitely second one is the market, right? See, when you're talking about an idea, is there a market? Is there a customer who can buy your market? How big is the market? Who are your other competitors? What are they doing? What are you doing? How can you bring in an element of differentiation? See, differentiation again does not mean only in terms of technical features. Differentiation could also be in terms of pricing, could be in terms of business model. Like people could be selling it as a product, you could probably sell it as a service, right? So if there's a differentiation, if there's a market, how difficult, easy the market is secondary. I think that's the next big factor.
correct, ma'am. So, ma'am, but there's always a problem like when a student or an innovator starts with an idea,
Yeah.
they really don't know how do they size the market and quantify the market. So, do you have any suggestions on how should they approach understanding the
Sure.
market?
To be very frank, that's the I personally don't. I'm not a firm believer in the TAM concept or whatever you talk because it's all numbers, right? See, the best way to validate a market is being in the market, if possible. Now, for example, I was talking to a student innovator few years back. He said he wanted to make an air-conditioned helmet. So I told him, good, why don't you go talk to 100 people and come back? So together, me and the fellow sat together. We made a list of questions what he should be asking the potential customer. So he went, spoke to a lot of people on these questions, and then came back to me after 15 days. He said, "Ma'am, I've decided to drop the idea." Right? Why I asked? He said there are a lot of other issues. People say, "I already have a helmet, so why should I buy a new helmet? What is the cost at which you will sell? Are you able to sell me a helmet for 3 to 3,500 rupees? Then probably I may buy. I have an existing helmet. Can you make this air conditioned?" So these were the questions. And he said for the current bandwidth he had, if he has to make it a retrofit which can go into a current helmet, he can definitely not make it at 3,500 rupees. He said, "Ma'am, I'm dropping the idea for now. Let me move forward." So if there's an opportunity to talk to somebody who may be a potential customer, do that. That is the easiest, simplest thing to do.
Correct. So and friends, just to be, since given my background with investments, it's always better to have customer validation investors like that, and they term it as product market fit, right? And if you are able to arrive to your product market fit early, your chances of getting investments also improve. So do keep an eye on customers and keep validating all your hypotheses, because till you don't go there, it is always an hypothesis.
Correct.
Right. Apart from team and market, what else do an investor look at?
So generally traction as such, right? What is the amount you have done so far? And there's something called skin in the game. You know, how far the entrepreneurs have put their own skin in the game. Because many of them whom I have met, they say, ma'am, I'm working in this company, I'm exploring this idea. If the idea clicks, then I will start the company. That doesn't work, right? If you yourself don't have confidence, saying you can do this full time, it will take off, who else will have confidence? So the skin in the game is very, very important for an entrepreneur. How serious you are, number one. Number two, what is the amount of traction you have? If you say, I started with this idea, I have met so many customers, this is the feedback. I have built this particular part of the technology. I have built so many modules, I've deployed it here. This is the feedback I've got. This is how I've changed, this is how I've pivoted. Again, rebuild the solution. Again, deployed it. I've connected to so many people I've spoken. That is the kind of traction we look for at very early stage startups.
Right, right. I mean, what do you think about competition? Because many startups that we interact, they always tell that my product is new, there is no competitor in the market. So, what do you give as an advice to people? Like, how should they look at competition, and how should they do that analysis? Because it's a very critical thing to understand the ecosystem, and
Correct.
many of us we fail at.
Yeah. No, I think the world probably will have only one and only one Steve Jobs. Probably one or two more may come, right? So there is enough competition all around. I think that we should assume. Find out where is the competition. What are the competitors doing? What is it that you can do which they are not doing? Could be in terms of again say pricing or business model. Essentially, it centers around these three, four things. One is definitely the technical features, what he has, what you don't have, or what he doesn't have, what you can have. Number two, what affordable price can you give? Which target market are you looking at? And what is your business model? How are you trying to give? Is it a product or a service? And is the see, many times even we have experience, right? There are products which are available but beyond your reach. There are no distributors. You don't know how to do. Then there's no service, post sale service which is there. Keep all this in mind and define the segment you want to be in,
Right.
and see then work backwards. And how can you build that? So I don't think there is any market in the world where there's no competition.
That's totally true. And guys, just to be very clear, having competition is good. That actually validates that there is a problem in the market,
Exactly.
right? If there is no competition, you need to show that there's a problem in the market. So don't worry that there's a competition. Always, embrace the competition, and you have to see how better you can be from them. So just giving you an insight that there is a new term or new word that I learned yesterday called as resegmented market. So do have a Google search on resegmented market. It's there in Wall Street Journal. This thing, you just type it, you'll get that as a first link, I believe. And do have a read on it. It's a very good 5-minute article which you should look at, and which I didn't know earlier. So that's one of the things that I would say. Given that we are almost reaching that 1 hour schedule, I'll just quickly wind up with a couple of questions, and probably you can take them as one go.
Sure.
So one question was from Swapna, like how do you calculate exactly how many more new shares you should give to an investor? So do you want to give a one or two line on that?
Sure. No, it all boils down to valuation. What is your current valuation? How many shares? In fact, we had this issue. One of our startup, he's raising his next round of funding. And because his valuation has now changed to what we invested early on, so we would be getting additional shares now. So share allotment is based on your valuation on the date when you are either raising money or you're diluting, either ways.
And Swapna, to be very frank, it's just a calculation, and your CA could be the best person to tell you. You should not worry about that part. It doesn't change your number of shares that you will hold. Of course, because the new share is added, your percentage will get diluted, but that doesn't mean that you are losing the number of shares you originally held. So don't worry on that much. CA will give you a very small number, and you can always add it. And you don't need to be an expert in each and every aspect of it. There are people who can do it at a very low cost. No worries on that. Secondly, ma'am, there are a couple of questions. One is in application of the competition, it's mentioned that one person in team should have technical background. But right now, I don't have a technical person. So is there really a need of a tech person in a team? So this is regarding the DS Tech Challenge that's coming up.
No, see, the whole objective is it's a tech challenge, right? So, and the whole objective is to help the team build a tech solution deployed in the field. If you don't have a person with a tech background, or if you yourself are capable of building the technology solution, then there's no problem.
Right. But I believe that he's from a commerce background, but no
Yeah.
technical team person. So will
It may be
again-
difficult, right? It may be difficult.
Right. So it may be difficult. So Srinivas, a good way to go about is find your school friends who have a tech background and probably team up with that person and join it, and that could be a good start for you, and it helps you a lot actually. And there's one more question by Amal Kiran. How do startups pitch investors? Can I share my idea directly to Derby or come down for a discussion?
You can do both. You can do both. And I think it's very important for any startup, do not burn your bridges early. See, if you may know a very good potential investor, right? You say, yeah, I want to make my pitch to the investor, but are you investor ready? I think that's very important. So don't burn your bridges early on. The reason I said is, if you preempt or even before you're ready, don't start to initiate this conversation, because when you initiate this conversation and the person is not impressed, all your doors will be shut. You will not have an opportunity to go back again. So if you are really good, say, and you should do a lot of homework on what specific investors look for, what stage do they invest. All these criteria are available in the, whether you talk to an angel group or a VC, it will be there in their website. Right? What mandate do they have? At what stage do they look for investment in the startups? After doing thorough homework, only then you pitch to the investor. Right? Otherwise, you'll be burning bridges early. Be careful on that.
Right. So just to add on to this point, it's better that you do all your homework and then pitch. But let's say you did it, and there's a problem now. So it's not like you cannot go back to the investor. You can go back, but see to it that you have a substantial growth. So once you have a substantial growth, anyone will like to look at you once again. But no point in with going within 2 months and not having a growth and just going back. No point, as ma'am rightly said. Be very careful in that on those aspects. And at the end of the day, investor is just a human being. He's a friend of you who also wants to make money out of your opportunity. So just talk to them casually. That's all you need to do. You don't need to be like so formal that you stammer and you forget what you want to talk. So be careful on that, and just be a happy-to-go-lucky person and just have a random chat, and who knows, you may get your next investor.
So another thing is that see, investors also know, most of the investors also pool in their own resources through multiple HNIs and all that.
Correct.
So they are also accountable to somebody above them.
Correct.
So ultimately, it's all the returns what matters, and they are also putting huge risk into your startup, right? I think that we should keep in mind.
That's very true. So if you're going to an investor, you should remember that you have 100% commitment, because it's someone else's money and you have to give it back as well. So
Yeah.
though it is equity and your personal property doesn't get into stake, but that doesn't mean that we can play with someone's money. So do be serious if you're entering that. Just as a parting thought, given
Yeah.
that we have reached 1 hour mark, like just going bit into a student entrepreneurship and the NEP that's coming up. What do you think as the future, and how are the opportunities for the students to start their ventures now? And there is also a kind of a teaching question that if a student starts a startup while studying, they will not be able to concentrate on studies. So how do you think a student can tackle these questions, and more and more investors start looking at student startups as one of their options?
Definitely. I think it's a very relevant question. Both the NEP and in fact Government of India on the DST website, they've uploaded a draft innovation entrepreneurship policy for the country. If you go through the document, most of it is talking about facilitating entrepreneurship cell, supporting student entrepreneurs, and creating ecosystem. I think Government of India wants every technology institute in the country to have an innovation entrepreneurship cell to support students and all that. Definitely, it is there. And as far as the NEP is concerned, it's going to be an extremely flexible education ecosystem going forward, where every student will be given opportunity to build a startup when he's there as a student. And in fact, many universities, which are thinking ahead of times, they say, in fact, even I was talking to a couple of universities, they were mentioning that if there's a student who has a startup from day one and is very serious about building his company, nurturing it, we could help that student graduate out with his company at the end of 4 years, even if his academic, without giving much stress on his academic performance and academic workload. Then what else would you need to be on the campus, right? I think, and If a student who's very serious as an entrepreneur would not do justice to his academics, I don't agree. Because I knew a student who was running his company from second year on the campus. Nobody knew much about him. He had a co-founder from another engineering college. Both were running the company from the second year. Graduated with first class. Hardly used to attend anything else in the college. Used to come to his class, go back to his company, run his company. Today he has a 25-member team in Rajaji Nagar. He's there in four countries, doing extremely well. So I think that, and as students who are especially in the semester scheme, you know how to manage your semester in the last 15, 20 days before your exam. Right? I mean, let us agree, it's a fact. So the rest of the semester, put it to productive use, run your company at the campus.
That's totally true, guys. I've been having a student startup right from my master's days and even in my PhD now, and have been a good student all throughout. So don't worry on that. People will question you, but show them with your performance, and
Exactly.
they will not really bug you after. Once you prove that, yeah, you can handle both, right? So, ma'am, thanks a lot for your
Thank you so
time.
much.
Actually, I had a lot more questions, but if we go through it, it will take another 1 hour. But given that we need to have that in 1 hour, so thanks a lot for the
Very
time.
interesting, nice talking to you, Siddharth.
Thank you,
so
ma'am.
much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank